April 16, 2025. Valero Energy Corporation announced it is shutting down its Benicia refinery by April 2026. 170,000 barrels per day of gasoline production gone. That is 8.94% of California's total refining capacity disappearing. More than 400 workers are losing their jobs. According to the company's statement, the closure follows years of regulatory pressure, an $82 million fine, and California's strictest in North America environmental regulations. But this is not just about gas prices anymore. Republican Congressman Vince Fong from Bakersfield issued a stark warning. California hosts more than 30 military bases that rely on in-state fuel production. Travis Air Force Base, Camp Pendleton, Naval Base San Diego, Edwards Air Force Base, all dependent on California refineries for jet fuel and diesel. When refineries shut down, military readiness gets compromised. And according to a new report from USC professor Michael Misch and petroleum expert Micah Risa, California's energy crisis is now a clear and present threat to national security.
Valero spent over $1 billion just to prepare to exit California. Benicia Mayor Steve Young called the news deeply impactful for the entire community. Valero has long been part of Benicia's identity and economy, he said. The refinery employs more than 400 people in this small Solano County city on the Carquinez Strait, making it one of the county's largest employers. Those 400 families are about to lose their jobs by spring 2026. Governor Gavin Newsom responded at a press conference the same day. "I can assure you, beginning last night, we had all hands, and we are in the process of addressing any anxiety that may be created or any market disruption that may be created by that announcement," Newsom said. Notice what he did not say. He did not acknowledge that his policies caused the closure. He did not admit California's regulations drove Valero out. Instead, he focused on managing anxiety and market disruption after the fact. Here is what makes this worse. This was not a surprise. Valero has been operating the Benicia refinery since 2000, processing 170,000 barrels per day of crude oil into gasoline, jet fuel, and asphalt. For 25 years, the facility supplied California with nearly 9% of its refining capacity. But California's regulatory environment became impossible to navigate. In October 2024, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District imposed nearly $82 million in fines on Valero for toxic chemical releases and other violations at the Benicia site. It was the largest penalty ever issued by the Bay Area Air District. According to the Air District, a 2019 inspection found that Valero failed to report toxic emissions from the facility's hydrogen system since at least 2003. These emissions included benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene, compounds that cause cancer, reproductive harm, and other toxic health effects, the Air District said. Air District officials stated that refinery management knew about the hydrogen system problems since at least 2003, but failed to report or prevent them. Valero also settled a lawsuit brought by environmental group Baykeeper for $2.38 million after the company uncovered evidence that the company was spilling oil refinery waste into the San Francisco Bay. During Valero's most recent earnings call, CEO Lane Riggs described California's regulatory and enforcement environment as the most stringent and difficult of anywhere else in North America. California's low-carbon fuel standard requires fuel producers to steadily reduce the carbon intensity of gasoline and diesel based on emissions across a fuel's full life cycle. While the policy is designed to cut greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality, it adds massive compliance costs for refiners operating in an already constrained market. Think about the business decision Valero faced. Spend hundreds of millions complying with regulations that keep getting stricter. Pay $82 million in fines for violations dating back 20 years. Settle lawsuits for environmental damages. all while California plans to ban gas car sales by 2035. What company invests billions in refinery infrastructure when the state actively plans to eliminate demand for your product? Valero chose to leave, and they are not alone. Phillip 66 officially terminated operations at its Los Angeles refinery on October 17, 2025. That facility produced 139,000 barrels per day, another 8.3% of California's capacity. Combined, the Valero, Benicia, and Phillip 66 Los Angeles closures eliminate nearly 20% of California's in-state refining capacity, according to Congressman Vince Fong and Stan Ellis, both Republicans from Bakersfield. By April 2026, California will have only 7 refineries remaining. In 1983, California had 40 refineries. In just over 40 years, the state lost 33 refineries, an 82.5% decline. Each closure makes the remaining refineries more critical. Any disruption at a single facility now creates immediate statewide price spikes.
Here is where this becomes a national security issue. California is home to more than 30 military bases under the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. These installations include Travis Air Force Base, Edwards Air Force Base, Naval Base San Diego, Camp Pendleton, Naval Air Station Lemoore, Vandenberg Space Force Base, Fort Irwin, Naval Base Ventura County, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, and dozens more. According to Greenlee, the U.S. Department of Defense is the world's largest institutional consumer of petroleum, using an average of 93 million barrels of fuel per year between 2015 and 2020. Military aviation fuels are highly specialized and of the highest grades. California's refineries are equipped to process these specialized fuels. Valero's Benicia refinery is one of the major jet fuel providers to military installations in Northern California. The refinery produces between 600,000 and 1.4 million gallons of jet fuel per day. With Valero closing, California could lose 30 to 35% of its jet fuel production capacity, according to petroleum expert Mike Ariza. Travis Air Force Base provides a clear example of the vulnerability. The base's resupply threshold triggers when on-hand inventory falls below roughly 8 to 9 million gallons. At that point, Valero dispatches a jet fuel batch from Benicia through a dedicated pipeline. If Valero closes and the pipeline shuts down, Travis would need to receive jet fuel by truck. Based on approved truck capacities, that would require approximately 21 trucks per day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, just to compensate for the lost pipeline deliveries. Now scale that across the entire state. Congressman Vince Fong warned in a December op-ed that California's loss of refining capacity jeopardizes military readiness. The brave men and women who serve at California bases are capable of deploying anywhere in the world within a handful of hours, but only if they have the fuel they need to accomplish their mission, Fong wrote. California is central to countering the rising threat from China in the Indo-Pacific region. But instead of working across the aisle to address this threat and strengthen California's role in national security, Newsom has continued to intentionally reduce California's refinery capacity and in-state oil production, weakening our defense posture in order to appease his far-left base, Fong said. Assemblyman Stan Ellis, also from Bakersfield, said in an interview with the California Globe that California military bases could end up running out of jet and aviation fuels should a military conflict unfold. Why? Because of Governor Newsom's political policies, resulting in shockingly detrimental and lethal regulations of the oil and gas industry, Ellis said. California has no inbound pipelines supplying crude oil, gasoline, or aviation fuels, which amplifies U.S. vulnerability to supply disruptions. A report authored by Ellis, USC professor Michael Misch, and petroleum expert Mike Ariza warns that California is now facing a pending gasoline and aviation fuels crisis of potentially epic levels. In all planning scenarios, California will be increasingly dependent on non-U.S. foreign sources for gasoline, the report states. Rather than investing in its state's resources and employment, California's policies necessitate paying petro-states, such as Iraq and Saudi Arabia, over $60 million a day for crude oil imports. Assemblyman Ellis went further. If China or Russia decides to pull the plug on India getting crude for us, guess what? It's catastrophic, he told ABC 10. We are talking about military preparedness being affected, and we are talking about gas lines. The Defense Fuel Supply Point, which provides fuel to military bases, maintains only minimal days' supplies of fuel stocks. It acquires fuel from commercially available refineries owned by for-profit corporations and predominantly uses commercially available pipelines for delivery. In practical terms, this means that if fuel deliveries stop, California and its neighbors begin running dry almost immediately, imperiling both civilian mobility and military operations, the Ellis-Mish-Ariza report states. The collective effect of California's policies and regulations has created vulnerabilities to America's war readiness, which are undoubtedly well-studied and well-known to our adversaries, the report warns. But the disaster does not stop at refinery closures. California's pipeline infrastructure is collapsing as well. In September 2025, Crimson Midstream, LLC, warned that California's largest inland oil pipeline is in danger of closing within months. The San Pablo Bay Pipeline hauls oil from the Bakersfield area to Northern California refiners, including Valero's Benicia facility and PBF Energy's Martinez plant. These two refineries account for roughly one-fifth of the state's fuel-making capacity. Robert Waldron, CEO of Crimson's parent company, Core Energy Infrastructure Trust, wrote a letter to Governor Newsom's office explaining the crisis. The San Pablo Bay Pipeline is losing $2 million a month, creating severe financial distress for the company, Waldron wrote. The pipeline's fortunes have waned amid a sudden and unexpected shift of regional oil production to rival pipelines serving Los Angeles area fuel makers. Crude pipelines are designed to pump certain quantities of oil. When volumes fall below minimum ranges, the costs of operating them can soar. The San Pablo Bay Pipeline's minimum daily operating capacity is around 60,000 to 65,000 barrels per day, according to consultant Turner, Mason and Company. Waldron noted that a shutdown risks shifting 15,000 barrels of daily crude supplies to highways aboard tanker trucks, suggesting the pipeline is already running significantly below capacity. Crimson is seeking a 37% increase in the fees it can charge to crude shippers, a temporary $3.75 per barrel tariff, hike, and other measures. Without near-term relief, Crimson will likely be forced to shut down the San Pablo Bay Pipeline this fall, Waldron warned. Any interruption in San Pablo Bay Pipeline shipments would force Bay Area refiners to resort to more imports of ocean-borne crude, Waldron said. And here's the kicker. The Western States Petroleum Association has been warning California lawmakers since last year that diminishing Central Valley oil production risked shuttering pipelines such as the San Pablo Bay conduit. Lawmakers knew this was coming. Newsom knew this was coming. They ignored the warnings. California crude output has fallen by more than 70% in the past 4 decades as fields first tapped in the early 20th century began to run dry. Competition increased from lower-cost sources, and some of the nation's strictest environmental rules piled on costs. In 1982, less than 6% of California's crude oil came from outside the United States, according to Newsom's own California Energy Commission. Today, that number has skyrocketed to over 60%. Brazil now accounts for 20% of California's imported supply, and 21% comes from Iraq. If the San Pablo Bay Pipeline shuts down and Valero closes, California loses both refining capacity and the infrastructure to deliver crude oil to remaining refineries. The entire system is collapsing simultaneously.
Now let's talk about what this means for gas prices. As of December 2025, the statewide average gas price in California is $4.34 per gallon, $1.40 higher than the national average of $2.94.
Retail prices for all grades of gasoline in California reached $4.278 per gallon for the week ending December 15, 2025, according to the Energy Information Administration. This reflects a 2.53% drop from the prior week. But that drop is temporary. California hit $4.93 per gallon on April 10, 2025, the highest price in the country this year. Some stations in Los Angeles were charging over $6 per gallon. San Francisco saw $7 per gallon at certain stations. The state previously hit $6.43 per gallon during the week of June 16, 2022, the highest weekly state gas price since 2018. Mike Ariza, who co-authored the USC report on California's energy outlook, told ABC 10 that gas could reach $10 to $12 per gallon in extreme scenarios. Professor Michael Misch from USC's Marshall School of Business estimates that in 2025, Californians will need to budget an additional $1,000 just to cover the rising cost of gas. Misch calculated that Californians already need an extra $600 to $1,000 annually just for gas, compared to the national average. With increased import dependency, those costs will likely rise. Here's the math. California burns through 38 million gallons of gasoline daily, according to the California Energy Commission. That is 13.8 billion gallons annually. With the Valero Benicia closure removing 1.3 billion gallons of annual production and the Phillip 66 Los Angeles closure removing another 1.3 billion gallons, the state must replace nearly 2.6 billion gallons, nearly 19% of total consumption. Where will that gasoline come from? Imports. California currently imports about 1.1 billion gallons per year, which is 8% of supply. With the closures, import dependency jumps to 17%. The California Energy Commission projects that as much as 30% of the state's gasoline demand will need to come from imports by 2026, especially in the northern half of the state. California already hit a 4-year high in May 2025, importing 279,000 barrels per day, according to vessel tracking data from Kepler. 70% of those imports came from South Korea and other Asian exporters. That is 187,000 barrels per day just from Asia. The remaining imports are coming from unexpected places. India sent 39,000 barrels per day of gasoline and alkylate in May, the highest since January 2024. California even started importing from the Bahamas, which shipping experts say is typically too expensive to make economic sense. A gasoline tanker voyage from Singapore to California takes 30 to 40 days, according to Skip York, chief energy strategist for Turner Masson and Company. That means the gasoline you pump in February was loaded onto a ship in December. Any disruption, such as a typhoon, shipping delays, or port congestion, adds weeks to that timeline. Every gallon that arrives by tanker, instead of being refined locally, adds transportation costs, storage costs, insurance, and risk premiums. Tankers emit approximately 50% more carbon dioxide per barrel mile than pipelines or rail, according to analysis from Lloyd's. A 40-day voyage burning heavy fuel oil adds substantial costs that ultimately show up at the pump. California is now importing gas from Asia and burning bunker fuel across the Pacific to deliver gasoline to the state that claims to fight climate change. The environmental impact of shipping gas from South Korea is many times worse than refining it locally, but California can claim lower in-state emissions while increasing global emissions. Now, here is where it gets truly absurd. The Newsom administration disputed claims that California's energy policies pose a threat to national security or the military's fuel supply. A spokesperson said officials have identified no credible risks to readiness. The spokesperson pointed to a bipartisan set of energy bills passed at the end of the last legislative session, designed to help stabilize fuel markets as the state shifts towards cleaner energy. These measures include authorizing up to 2,000 new oil drilling permits annually. Read that again. California is authorizing 2,000 new oil drilling permits annually. The same governor who promised to phase out fossil fuels by 2045, the same governor who signed regulations making it nearly impossible for refineries to operate profitably, the same governor whose policies drove out 20% of California's refining capacity, that governor is now authorizing more oil drilling. On December 15, 2025, reports emerged that Governor Newsom is considering allowing more oil drilling to keep refineries supplied. The governor who promised to end oil drilling by 2045 is now expanding drilling permits. The same week he is defending his energy policies on social media, he's reversing those same policies. In response to the Valero closure announcement, Newsom issued a directive to the California Energy Commission to intensify planning with refiners and other market participants to ensure Californians maintain a safe, affordable, and reliable fuel supply throughout this energy transition. Translation: we did not plan for this, and now we are scrambling. In April 2025, Newsom's office sent a letter to California Energy Commission Vice Chair Siva Ganda, reinforcing the state's commitment to close coordination, market stability, and consumer protection. The letter came after Valero announced its closure, not before. Reactive, not proactive. The governor signed a historic package of bipartisan legislation to stabilize the gas market, cut pollution, and save Californians billions of dollars, the spokesperson said. This package included Senate Bill 237, legislation that increases crude oil production in Kern County, boosting domestic crude availability as California manages its long-term energy transition while maintaining strong health and environmental safeguards. Translation: we are increasing oil production because our policies destroyed refining capacity, and now we need more crude oil to keep remaining refineries from closing. The Newsom administration also argued that California's fuel supply is becoming more secure and less oil-dependent. Nearly 65% of all diesel used for transportation in the state is now renewable diesel, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the spokesperson said. By expanding EV manufacturing, charging infrastructure, and homegrown renewable energy, California is reducing dependence on foreign crude and strengthening energy security with electricity generated here in America. But gasoline is not diesel, and 20% EV adoption is nowhere near the 51% mandate by 2026 or the 100% mandate by 2035. California is still burning 13.8 billion gallons of gasoline annually, and that demand is not disappearing overnight. Here's what the collapse looks like when you zoom out. Valero Benicia closes April 2026, 170,000 barrels per day gone, 400 jobs lost. Phillip 66 Los Angeles already closed October 2025, 139,000 barrels per day gone. 600 employees and 300 contractors lost their jobs. Combined, these two refineries represent 290,000 barrels per day, 20% of California's refining capacity. Earlier closures include the 2023 shutdown of the Phillip 66 refinery in Santa Maria, the 2024 conversion of its Rodeo refinery to a renewable facility, and the 2023 conversion of the Marathon Martinez refinery to a renewable facility. The state has gone from 40 refineries in 1983 to just 7 after Valero closes. The San Pablo Bay pipeline is losing $2 million a month and may shut down by spring 2026. If that pipeline closes, remaining refineries like PBF Martinez cannot get crude oil from California fields. They must import more foreign crude by tanker. California now imports over 60% of its crude oil from foreign sources. 22.3% comes from Iraq, 16.9% from Ecuador, 16.4% from Saudi Arabia, and 20% from Brazil, according to Newsom's own California Energy Commission. Any disruption in these countries directly impacts California's supply. Tankers must navigate potential choke points like the Strait of Malacca or weather events in the Pacific.
In February 2025, a fire at PBF Energy's Martinez refinery took 10% of California's gasoline capacity offline. Gas prices in neighboring Arizona jumped 50 cents overnight. Nevada prices spiked 40 cents. California had to import emergency supplies from South Korea in the Gulf Coast at premium prices. In December 2025, a fire at Chevron's El Segundo refinery disrupted production. The loss of jet fuel forced a rerouting of a Gulf tanker from the East Coast to the West Coast and a rerouting of Northern California-produced jet fuel south, according to Mike Arisa. These disruptions now cause cascading problems because California